Thursday night regular LinkedIn Live series. Except this one's a little different because instead of talking about partnering in general, we're going to talk about what it's like the first 90 days. And I have 3 amazing guests that I'm very excited about our session today. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's see, in alphabetical order. Oh, that would mean boys go first. So we'll let George. All right, George, you get to go first.
Great. I go for it alphabetically too. That's awesome. So I am George Hope. I run the Americas channels for Infoblox. I started in June. Prior to that, I worked for HPE for the last 9 years, including the SimpliVity acquisition, leading worldwide channels, most recently, and leading worldwide distribution before that. And then prior to that, I was at EMC for 18 years or 72 quarters in various sales or channels leadership roles. I am a Bostonian living in Charleston, empty nest-ish. My son, my youngest, moved out in July, and my oldest moved back in September. So
there you go.
I've had a month and a half of empty nesting, but I'm enjoying it with my wife.
Oh, thanks, George. I'm so glad you're here. Heather.
Hey, everybody. I'm Heather Tenuto. I'm the CEO of the Muse and Fairy God Boss, where we help employers amplify their employer brand to attract next-gen quality talent that aligns not only on skills and experience, but also on culture and values. I've been at the Muse and Fairy God Boss since August. Before that, for 4 years, I was the Chief Revenue Officer at Ziff Solutions, whose Ziff One's platforms connect suppliers and their partners to drive a lot of revenue. And I've been in channel roles for the last 10 years before that. So I'm very excited to be here. I live in New York City with my husband and 14-year-old daughter. And thank you so much for having me on the show, T.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Awesome. All right. And Miss Tiffany.
Thanks, Teresa. Thank you for having me. I'm Tiffany Dunn. I lead the Americas channel sales at Autodesk. I have been in my role since August, so about 4 months. And I've worked in sales, direct sales, channel leadership my whole career in large organizations and in startups, but in SaaS. So this is my next venture. I live in the Bay Area with my husband and my 2 teenage girls.
That's fabulous. Yeah, we've got the country covered today. We're in all different places. So, okay, so let's get started. Let's jump in. So there was a lot of shift happening in the market right now, people in new roles, which is why we really wanted to do this session. As leaders in your organizations, what do you see is the most important in the first 90 days? Who wants to start us off? Heather, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I was thinking about this question and I thought, whenever you get a new role, you get excited and you get visions of your head of where you want to take the team, where you want to take the company. And I think that's okay. I think that generally you get hired because you have a vision. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to learn a lot before I do anything.
Right.
I think the truth is, though, it's like, if I called you, Teresa, and said, hey, next week I want to, go look at the Washington Monument. Can you give me directions? Your first question would be like, sure, but like, where are you coming from? Right. And so I feel like one part of that first 90 days is to really understand where the team is coming from. Mm-hmm. Not just to learn where they're at, but how they got there. I guess staying with the theme, we all studied history in school, right? And if you were born in the United States, like you own that history, whether or not you were there or you're not. And I think getting to a place where you understand the history of the team and the company and own it in a way where you can really drive the vision forward is really important. And it's not so easy to do because you're really leaning on the team to inform you and understand sort of how we got to the place where we are, what things do we want to keep doing, and what things do we want to change. So those are the things there where I really focused the first 90 days, and it helped me quite a bit, like take it into the next phase.
Great. Excellent. Tiffany, what's your view of the first 90 days?
Well, I did actually a lot of listening and educating, and coming from collaboration pretty much my entire career. I came into Autodesk, and it's a completely different industry, which is what I wanted. But I realized how much I don't know, and just really tried to educate myself on the industry, which is going to take a long time. But trying to understand where everybody, came from. Many people have been here for many years, so there's a lot of sweat equity, a lot of great background from people who are in the industry, whether it's construction or build or design or make, wherever they come from. So a lot of great industry knowledge. But I also wanted to get out and talk to partners and internally all the stakeholders as fast as possible. So I just jumped right in on that element and just talked to as many people as I possibly could to get perspective. And especially on my team, I tried to ask very similar questions so I could orient around a perspective. But a lot of it has been education and listening before I make a lot of major decisions or minor decisions. But putting a plan together, for the really the next 6, 9, 12 months
is critical. So George, you're now at about 150 days. So what was it like? What did you learn from the first 90 days?
Well, in the first 90, I mean, I had a similar approach on the first 90, where I had set up a ton of one-on-ones with a lot of people, right, cross-functionally, up and down the stack, right, whether it was my team, my peers, my managers' peers, execs, cross-functional teams. I needed to get the lay of the land, but I will admit I did lead the witness a bit. And it was important to get those conversations, or like you had to go into those conversations with what you wanted to know. Otherwise, everybody would freestyle and you'd get inconsistent information. So I knew really what I wanted to know, and I tried to lead the conversations in that direction. I also had an industry change as well. So there was a lot for me to learn, but of course, a lot I could bring. And I created some reviews to take the team through getting a picture of their business. So, and then I had to pull it all together and then share the findings with some of the executives, because of course they want to know quickly when they hire you, what are you going to do? What did you find and what are you going to do differently? So I shared the findings with the leaders, cross-functional teams, set priorities, got feedback, of course, and kind of validated it and iterated. And also went, on a bunch of partner visits, because that's where you really get the data.
Yeah, that's where you learn.
That was first 90. You want to pivot to second 90 or?
Not yet. Let's do that next. But before you go there, and George, you can start this, and then Tiffany and Heather, is there anything you would do differently when you look back on the first 90?
Well, I would say what I would do differently is, first of all, I found out quickly you can't play the new card anymore. But if I had to do it again, I would bite off less. I think you tend to create this list of what life could look like utopian wise, and you say, okay, I'm going to do all of these things and we're going to focus on it. And I think looking back after the second 90 days, it's like, okay, I think I bit off more than I could chew. And you set out to do everything, but then realize you need to prioritize. So I kind of subscribe to the theory. An old manager of mine used to say, if you try to do three things, you can do three things well. If you try to do 5 things, you'll do 2 things well. If you try to do 10 things, you'll do nothing well. Right. So you have to kind of, pick your spots and get your wins, build some credibility and move from there. And also look at it like, repetition is the mother of learning, that old proverb. You can't say things only once, right? You come in and you say, okay, we need to do this. And then nobody does it. And then you say, you need to do this again. And then finally people start to do it, start to build new habits, especially when you're transforming. And nothing done once can be a habit. So, I learned that value-added inspection is critical to running the business. And then the third piece is hiring, right? You can't hire wrong, right? If you're not surrounded by the right people, you need to be surrounded by the right people.
Yep.
And you need to define what you're looking for in a candidate. So recruiting is huge, and bringing in the the right people and inspect, that you have the right people in the right seats and that they have a record of having done what you need done before. I was reading a book recently, and it said you need to find people that get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it.
Love it. Love it. Heather.
I think that there's a little bit of the counter of what George is saying. I think that the Muse and Fairy God Boss have really strong cultures and amazing cultures. And I think that I listened a lot and was learning a lot. But I think when there's a new leader, people want to see things change. Like sometimes you're afraid to change too much at once. But I think that there's an appetite to say, hey, we've got someone new and this is different now. So I definitely agree with George that you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. But I think there are little places where you can make your mark and where people feel like, okay, this feels different and I understand where it's going, is really important as well. So I think that there's some things I was thinking about early on that at least I said, let me wait and see how some other things come together, and maybe making some small changes early on would be something I would do differently if I had to do it again.
It makes me wonder, is it different as a CEO versus a partner leader? I don't know. Yeah, it's a great point. Tiffany, what's your view of what you would do differently?
Well, I think, I know that they wanted a fresh perspective and wanted to bring someone from the outside in. So I think there is an expectation that you are going to make changes, and that was an expectation early. But I think I would have communicated with my team maybe a little more. Over communication is never a bad thing. And so I think that's probably what I would have done differently. But other than that, I feel like I had a plan. And, I'm executing to plan.
One of the things I have had the privilege of talking to each of you individually, one of the things I notice about all three of you is you each have a theme and analogies that you speak in relating people to the situation, what has to change. And I just find that intriguing that all of you do that. Is part of your daily life. So, yeah.
We love analogies.
Yes, George. I remember George has been telling analogies since I knew him when we were 10 or 15 when we were working at EUC.
Well,
not too long ago. We're still young.
I think that's part of, like, there's a lot around communication, right, that we could talk about. So I spent a few years as a high school teacher, and I taught ninth grade, and the kids that I taught couldn't read. They were in the ninth grade, but they couldn't read yet. And so the time I spent with them was teaching them to read, but also part of that was having to read to them. And so if you remember, and everyone remembers getting read stories to as a kid, it calms you down, right? And when we read stories to our kids when they're young, it calms them down. And I found the same thing was happening with these crazy ninth graders who, all ninth graders are crazy. The second I started to tell a story, they would calm down and their body would change. And so there's something about stories that puts people in a different place emotionally, and they hear it better. So I think all of us have figured that out, that you get a better response when you tell a story rather than telling someone what to do.
Right.
And so it works. So I would encourage people to think about where that they could put that in their communication plans.
Yeah, the how of the communication really matters. So the other thing is each of you have been brought in to drive lead change, lead transformation in these respective places. Can you talk about how do you balance that with what's the status quo or what needs to be preserved? And maybe Tiffany, you could start us off.
Well, look, Autodesk has an amazing culture. It really does. And it's amazing that you could be this large of an organization and still maintain that culture. But in everything they do, from calibration to strategic realization to, executive communication, they talk about different aspects of the culture. And so that of course, you want to preserve because, there's a lot of due diligence when you come in to make sure you'd fit the culture, right? So you want to preserve that. And at the same time, you look for the things that people sometimes say, well, we've always done it that way, which when someone says that, it's like sticking a knife in me. So you also want to figure out where you can make the change, but how fast you can make the change also is associated with the culture. So one of my colleagues said to me, hey, when I came in, she was relatively new. She said, I want to do all these things and you're going to want to do that. But, you also have to understand how much can people absorb in terms of change. So it's that balance.
That's so true. George, what's your view of driving transformation, maintaining status quo, somewhere in between?
Well, I think, what was interesting coming into this role, and you have to kind of look at it internally and externally as well. For the most part, I kind of kept the one-to-ones going so I could have some type of a cadence to maintain visibility into what was going on. But when I look at a channel opportunity, the first thing you have to figure out is what phase you're in to define your approach. And I look at it, you could be in one of four places. You could be in a build, you could be in an optimize, you could be in a transform, or you could be in a scale. The cool part about this opportunity is it kind of straddled a couple of phases, and it sat a little bit between optimize and transform. And the reason for that is that internally we've been a network company for 20 years, and externally viewed as such. But we're transitioning such that our offerings now add significant value in security and add significant value in cloud. So, not only do we have to optimize the existing business by rolling out kind of more of a focus partner program where we're trying to get fewer, bigger partners to drive relevance. But then on the other side, we have to educate everybody on what's new about us. I had a meeting with a partner the other day, and we asked them in the beginning of the meeting, do they know what we do? And they said yes. And then at the end of the meeting, they said, can we change our answer?
Wow.
Back to change our answer to no, because we really didn't know what you do. And now we want to do a deeper dive into, to it to get into, what we can now leverage based on this new information. So it's kind of a cool dynamic. We're a 20-ish year old market leader that can operate as a well-funded startup because we're in emerging markets for us, trying to create this new perception. But we have this fallback business, and it kind of merges a lot of different businesses. So the role changes quite a bit, and we do have an awesome culture, very similar to Autodesk, where everybody is all about the mission and wants to learn and wants to figure out how we educate the partners on what we do, and winning over the partners is huge for us. So everybody has to be on the same page.
George, I'm in the same boat. Autodesk's perception is, you're a CAD CAM company, right? There's so many things we sell, and that's run rate, and it's fabulous technology, but we are creating a design and make category, and we have so much innovative technology and around AI and with manufacturing, construction, in engineering. So it's trying to change that perception to the marketplace, and also bringing our partners along with us to really embrace new technologies and be able to effectively sell them as well.
That's great. Heather, how are you driving change and transformation? Because you're putting companies together, funding. There's a lot of very different from where they are in the journey.
Yeah, I think where we are is we recently made an acquisition, and so we're about a year into that acquisition and being able to integrate those the companies. I think we've done a great job of that. I think and talking about the solution in a cohesive way is where we're at now. I think the Muse and Fairy Godboss are some of the best kept secrets in talent acquisition. And so our product is amazing. What we're able to do for companies is amazing. And the job now is just to make sure more people know about it. So George, you talked about having the right team around you. We believe that it's not just experience and skills that make that fit, but also alignment with culture and values. Like when you have that, right, your team just gels. And so we found a way to bring that to employers. So we just need more people to know about us. So the job ahead of me is scaling our sales and marketing functions and getting the word out, which, is about working on our messaging and working on our tactics, building a sales team. And so the change we're driving is really, how do we scale that? Like, what does it take to scale a sales and marketing organization? And so really what it comes down to is people have to do things a little bit differently, learn new things. And I think the key to making that happen, it goes back to the communication again. I think over communicating, and the thing I would add is creating structures to make sure that communication is happening regularly. Like what team meetings, like, I have a habit that I learned from my last CEO, who's a great mentor of mine, is that I send out a Monday morning message. Every Monday at 8 o'clock, there's a message from me about what happened last week, what we're looking at this week. So it feels people expect it, and they expect they're going to learn things from it. So having those structures, whether they're regular emails or Slacks or meetings, to make sure the communication is flowing, I think is really important, especially when you're moving quickly through change.
That's great. So Heather, what's ahead for you in 2024? What are your big priorities as you are no longer new to being
Yeah, I'm very excited about kicking off 2024, just getting everyone regrounded in our mission and our vision and our core values and the plan. We've just finished writing the plan for 2024, sharing what that plan is, what the goals are, and what the KPIs that we're going to be measuring all throughout the year, and just sort of getting this like fresh swing at it. I'm as a sales leader before this, you're always excited about kicking off the next year. So making sure we do a great job of that, so everyone feels part of not only part of the company, but part of the goals, and knowing how they contribute to those goals is very exciting for me, and I'm excited to do it as we kick off the new year.
That's fantastic. How about you, Tiffany? What's ahead for you?
Very similar. We just inked our FY25 plan, which starts February 1st. And I'm just excited to execute on the plan. We've got, to George's point, we have 3 big priorities with the business, and it's around, growing the team, growing the partner relationship, and growing new business. And so that's pretty much inked and ready to go. And I'm excited about orienting the team around it. I haven't actually had our team meeting until Thursday. I'm going to share more of the detail around it, and just get the orientation around the new year and what we're going to go, what we're going to execute together, the KPIs. We've got a lot of new, fresh ideas coming through that we're to, we put the strategy together. So then we're going to then go execute it. So thrilled.
Fantastic. So George, before I ask you what's ahead, you're now 150 in seat. So what changed between 90 and 150 for you? What was different versus the first 90 days?
Well, I think just the prioritizing, as I talked about before, right? Yeah, when you look at how many things you want to do, you have to kind of look at it realistically and say, okay, these are the priorities, and this is what has to happen, and what we need to align on as an organization. And it's a challenge, right? Because you want to do everything, but you have the internal and the external, right? Moving your own organization, like our channel account managers, is one thing, and getting the partners to move, like Tiffany and I were chatting about. Getting the partners to take action is like more of turning a battleship in a small harbor. You really have to focus on them, and you need to make it easier for them to do it. And it's a lot of it is around enabling the messaging to explaining to them what's in it for them, right? We'll start off every pitch with, what if you could this? What if you could that? Right? Would you be interested in pursuing it if your objective lined up with these things? Like with the partners, you have to put yourself you have to, like, the disposition that you have to have with them is you have to understand where they're heading, and what you do has to help them do what they
their business. Yeah,
doesn't start with what you do.
That's one of our big things in our courses is that exact lesson.
I think that's a really good point, right? Because you're really trying to make them successful. It's not all about you. And I think the other piece too is internally, we're trying to educate all the sales teams on the services and all of the value add that the partners are providing, because that is really, amazing work that they're doing out there in the field with our joint customers. And not all of our sales teams know all of that great information. So that's another initiative, is just trying to educate our sales teams, because they constantly change on the differentiation of all of our great partnerships.
That's great. All right. Last question, speed round. If you could look back and give one piece of advice for a person starting a role, whether it's an executive or an individual contributor, what would be your one thing and your one piece of advice? Let's see, Heather?
So I'm thinking of another analogy, and this is one that I stole from a different CEO. But when you're in a car and someone else is driving, and you're constantly grabbing the dashboard or trying to hit the brake, like you don't know what they're doing. If they take a turn really fast and you didn't expect it, like it feels really scary. However, if you're in a race car with a professional race car driver and he's like, hey, I'm going to take you around the track, those spins feel fun, right? And you're ready for them, and it's exhilarating and exciting, but it's the same ride. And so the difference is you know what's going to happen. You're expecting that this is what you expect. It's going to be exhilarating, and none of it's a surprise, so you can enjoy it. So it goes back to the communicating. Like, you can take people on twists and turns as long as they know it's going to happen, and they're not going to try to slam on the brake and clutch the dashboard if it's a surprise. So think about that. Yeah, exactly.
On the car, please.
Exactly.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. Let's see, George, what's your one thing?
I think my one thing, so one of the things we do as part of, culturally, our America's team, everybody starts their presentation with a quote. And in the one I landed on this morning was about why, right? Simon Sinek wrote that book. It starts with why. And I think the recommendation for everybody is finding the why, right? So if you're selling a vision, to your team, right, it's about you getting them to understand the why, right? They're not going to buy into the what, right? They buy the why. The what just supports your belief in the why. So getting them to understand the why, understanding the customer's why, understanding the partner's why, and kind of building your value proposition off of that. One of the examples he used in the book was around Apple, and Apple didn't invent the MP3 player, right? And nobody was looking for something that digitized music, that was a little device you could plug your headphones into. But they came out with 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? That was the why. If you want 1,000 songs in your pocket, this is your thing. Right. And once you have that why, then I think you're well on your way in any one of the directions.
And communicating your why and recommunicating your why and integrating your why with their why. Okay, we could keep going on the whys. There's a lot around the whys. Yeah. All right, Tiffany, your one thing.
Well, I have a couple of things. One is I always read Michael Watkins' The First 90 Days. It's a great business book. And it talks a little bit, George, it's similar. What you were saying is build, optimize, but it talks about kind of what stage you're in terms of an organization, your organization, and the overall organization, whether it's kind of startup or realign. Anyway, it gives you kind of an orientation around some of the priorities you should consider depending on where you are within your organization. That's one, because I think it's a good book. Secondly, I think it's really important to understand how your organization serves the other internal organizations. I mean, of course, as well as the partners, but what you do for them and how you serve them to make them successful. So understanding that as well as how you can make your partners successful. I think that's critical.
That's great. And of course, I would never leave anything without talking about trust. So trust is fundamental in building trust and keeping trust on this journey. So thank you so much. I hope that this was enlightening for the audience, and it was really rich contributions. Thank you very much, especially from very different perspectives. So awesome. Enjoy your day, and we'll see you again in February. And my friends, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Heather.
Thanks all. It was painless, right?
Excellent.
Bye-bye. Thanks.